they kind of self-deceived themselves into saying that the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan is the bad Taliban, the Tehrik-i-Taliban Afghanistan is the good Taliban. What followed almost immediately was that suddenly there was a massive spike in terror attacks inside Pakistan. The quasi-military regime in Pakistan is not in a mood or not in a position to countenance these attacks continuing, despite the massive number of operations that they have carried out in the Pashtun belt. Despite the massive deployment of troops, nothing seems to have worked. There have been strikes in the past, drone strikes, including airstrikes, but the ones that were carried out in December was seen as a major message that the Pakistanis were trying to deliver to the Afghan Taliban. Pakistan is really in a very tight spot insofar as Afghanistan is concerned. The great playwright Oscar Wilde had once said that what is worse than not getting what you desire is to get what you desire. And that is playing out for Pakistan insofar as Afghanistan is concerned. For 20 years, Pakistan supported the Taliban. They defied the international consensus against the Taliban, and they created a situation where the Afghan Republic that was formed after 9/11 in Afghanistan was no longer sustainable, and the Americans and the Europeans and other powers that have come into Afghanistan to stabilize that country abandoned Afghanistan. The Taliban took over. Pakistan's expectations at that point of time was that this is a great strategic victory. Pakistan will get almost like a client state in Afghanistan, because the Taliban would be deeply indebted to Pakistan, and that this would open up the territory of Afghanistan for Pakistan to reach out to Central Asia, which was originally a Pakistani dream way back in the mid-90s, when the Soviet Union had collapsed. The Central Asian republics had come into their own, had become independent states, and Pakistan thought that it would become the pivot, the transit and the trade route of Central Asia to the rest of the world. But the linchpin of that entire plan was Afghanistan. Afghanistan blew up. They never could get some kind of control over Afghanistan. There was a civil war out there, and then the whole plan unraveled. Almost 3 decades later, the Pakistanis got another chance in 2021, or at least they thought they got another chance, and that this time around the Taliban would capture all of Afghanistan. There would be no Northern Alliance. The Northern Alliance people, or the erstwhile Northern Alliance people, had become too soft. They had all run away from Afghanistan. There was virtually no challenge to the Taliban, and because of the long association between Pakistan supporting the Taliban, giving them safe havens, sanctuaries, supplying them with equipment, ensuring that they got the monies that they required, and even preparing some of their battle plans, including sending people from the Pakistani madrasas into Afghanistan to fight on the side of the Taliban. There was an entire infrastructure of terrorism that was created by the Taliban through Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan in Pakistan, but Pakistan looked the other way. They kind of self-deceived themselves into saying that the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan is the bad Taliban, the Tehrik-i-Taliban Afghanistan is the good Taliban, and they continued with this fiction until the Taliban came into power. And what followed almost immediately was that suddenly there was a massive spike in terror attacks inside Pakistan, courtesy the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan. Now, many Pakistani analysts had said even back then that there is nothing to choose between, there is no real sunlight between the TTA and the TTP. They are two sides of the same coin. In fact, many analysts said that they are born of the same womb, and that this is a mistake if anybody thinks that once the Taliban come into power in Afghanistan, they will sever their links with the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan and will deliver Pakistan whatever it wants in Afghanistan. Forget about the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan. There are the Taliban in Afghanistan have also not taken any action against the Baloch freedom fighters, some of whom are supposed to be located inside Afghanistan. So the situation is that the Taliban consider both the TTP as well as the Baloch as a kind of a counter, as a kind of a leverage against Pakistan. In a sense, the TTP gives the Taliban strategic depth inside Pakistan. What we have seen over the last almost 3 years, more than 3 years now, since August 2021, is that not only in the Pashtun belt of Pakistan, which is Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the Pashtun belt of Balochistan, but also the Baloch belt of Balochistan, there has been a massive spike in terror attacks. In fact, there are large swaths of territory which are only under the nominal control of the Pakistani state. Now, the situation is almost reaching a kind of a tipping point. The quasi-military regime in Pakistan is not in a mood or not in a position to countenance these attacks continuing. The constant, the increasing footprint of the TTP and to some extent the Baloch freedom fighters, they're wanting to crack down, but they are finding it increasingly difficult. Despite the massive number of operations that they have carried out in the Pashtun belt, despite the massive deployment of troops, nothing seems to have worked. In fact, the intensity and the scale of attacks, as well as the audacity of the attacks by the TTP particularly, have been increasing. Pakistan, as a result, has been forced to resort to cross-border strikes. Now, there have been strikes in the past, drone strikes, including airstrikes, but the ones that were carried out in December was seen as a major message that the Pakistanis were trying to deliver to the Afghan Taliban, because in a sense, unlike the earlier airstrikes or drone strikes that had been carried out inside Afghanistan against TTP targets, they were generally couched as in the border regions, almost as though Pakistan was saying that they had bombarded their own territory where they suspected TTP militants to be. But this time around it was pretty clear, although there was no official acknowledgement that these attacks had been carried out. But I think it was pretty clear that everybody knew that Pakistan had carried out these airstrikes. The reaction from Afghanistan, from the Taliban was pretty severe, including somebody like Mullah Khairkhwah coming out and saying that there is no reason why we should not be supporting the TTP. The defense minister Mullah Yaqub making very fiery statements, in fact going to the extent of saying, reacting to rumors that Pakistan was trying to do something in the Wakhan corridor, perhaps in conjunction with Tajikistan, to make it some kind of a buffer zone, maybe plant some kind of a regime out there so that one, it gives them connectivity to Central Asia. Secondly, it kind of insulates China from the fallout of what is happening in Afghanistan. And third, as a kind of a payback to Afghanistan. But I'm not quite sure if Pakistan has really thought through how to handle this crisis. There is some talk that there will be, some kind of a negotiated solution can be worked out. But I don't see how that is going to be possible. I think the Pakistanis also realize that a negotiated solution with the TTP guys, something that the Afghan Taliban have been pushing for, because they say that please don't expect us to attack the TTP, partly for reasons that they are our fraternal brothers, there is ideological affinity. Most of the TTP guys, in fact all of them, have sworn fealty towards the Amirul Mumineen of the Taliban. So they say, look, please don't expect us to act against these guys. Maybe we can take them away from the border regions, shift them into the interiors of Afghanistan so that they are not in the border regions, but we can't completely stop their activity. And in any case, most of their activities they carry out from inside Pakistan. Now again, maybe that's a bit of a fiction, something which the Pakistanis used to use with the Americans when the Americans complained about Taliban presence in Pakistan. The same thing is being done by the Taliban when they respond to Pakistan's demands that they take action against the TTP. So in a sense, the Afghan Taliban have said, look, this is your problem, you need to sort it out. Now, Pakistan is in a dilemma. What do they do? If they start talking to the TTP, the demands of the TTP are such that no sovereign government can concede those demands, because TTP effectively wants control over the erstwhile FATA region or the tribal areas which are now called the tribal districts in Pakistan and have been merged in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. I don't see how Pakistan can concede that demand to the TTP. There is also a lot of anger inside Pakistan against previous attempts to negotiate with the TTP, attempts which led to the TTP increasing its presence and its influence inside Pakistan. So there is very little appetite for going down that road. So the other option is that you carry out cross-border attacks. But cross-border attacks are not really a very workable solution. Now, the airstrikes which Pakistan carried out has led to a kind of at least a verbal response from Afghanistan. We also saw some clashes along the borders between Afghanistan and Pakistan, but so far things haven't really hasn't really gone up the escalation ladder in any significant way. But that is not to suggest that that will not happen in the future. The Pakistani strategy seems to be kind of flaky. And I say this because what is the end game out here? So you carry out a couple of raids. Yeah, it gives you, something to, do some chest thumping about. You can gloat that, you went in and you sent in your jets and you bombed some tents or some hutments, whatever, inside Afghanistan, and you can feel good about it. You can flaunt your muscle to your own people who you keep reconquering because there's no pushback from Pakistani people against the Pakistan army. So yeah, you can try and impress them, but does it impress the Afghans? And is this a bluff? Because how much of this kind of a thing can you do? Until and unless, of course, you're willing to escalate. So I think the message from the Pakistani side is that right now they are only attacking along the border regions where there are suspected TTP presence, camps, or the commanders are living out there. But I think the unstated message is that, look, the area of operation can be expanded, as can the intensity of attacks, and maybe at some level the signal to the Taliban is that, look, unlike the past when you were given sanctuaries in Pakistan, you were able to hide in the hills, you were operating from the shadows, you are now operating out in the open because you are now the government in Afghanistan, which means that we know about your whereabouts, we can strike you whenever we want to. Maybe this is the message, but can Pakistan afford to go down that road and afford to get sucked into the Afghan vortex? And the important thing is that, look, the Americans carried out tens of thousands of bombing raids. The Americans carried out a couple of thousand drone attacks. Maybe the number is a little off. Maybe it was just about 1,000 odd drone attacks, maybe even less. But they did carry out some very significant drone attacks, decapitation strikes, midnight raids, all kinds of things the Americans did, and they had boots on the ground in Afghanistan. They had an economic capability, the economic power they had military power, they had limitless resources, and despite all of that, it did not make much difference. Pakistan has none of what the Americans or before them the Russians have, and yet if the Pakistanis are going to get into this or get sucked into this Afghan vortex, then how will it work out for Pakistan? Secondly, there is this whole thing that how will the Afghans react? Will the Afghans simply take this lying down, or will they hit back? Now, the Afghan Taliban, they don't need modern jets, they don't need modern drones, they don't need any of that stuff. That's not their weapons of choice. Their weapons of choice are modern rifles, which they have in plenty. Their weapons of choice are things like night vision goggles, which the Americans have left behind, rocket launchers and stuff like that. Basically a light infantry weaponry, which they use to devastating effect, along with, of course, IEDs and suicide bombers. So they will use those. How far can Pakistan go and keep fighting this kind of a conflict? Given the fact that they don't have the same resources which either the Russians or the Americans had, given the fact that there are huge economic problems inside Pakistan, given the fact that the Pakistan Army's unpopularity is pretty much at its peak right now, the military top brass is not something that anybody really admires in Pakistan, except of course the usual camp followers and chamchas of the army. There is very little that anybody has very little good that anybody has to say about the Pakistan Army. And the political situation in Pakistan is not in the favor of the Pakistan Army. Now, given all of that, and given the problems that are now erupting in Balochistan, in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, I don't see how far the Pakistanis can go with this kind of move. So they are in a significant dilemma, and the dilemma is that, look, if they don't do anything, or if they just do the kind of stuff they've been doing so far, it does not stop the TTP from expanding its influence. On the other hand, if they do something about it and they take the war into Afghanistan, then they get sucked into that Afghan vortex. Even if they don't have boots on the ground, they provoke the Taliban to then hit out at Pakistan. So the message that the Pakistanis were trying to deliver is useful only to the extent that the other side takes the message. But if the other side calls the bluff, then what do you do? And for all you know, the Afghans or the Taliban rather seem to be playing this. They seem to be playing this pretty smartly. Yeah, they've reacted verbally with a lot of rhetorical flourishes. They've done that. They have made a bit of a show of retaliation with the cross-border attacks, but they've said they are open to a dialogue with Pakistan, and they would want a negotiated solution. So they are continuing to take Pakistan, adopt the same kind of policies that Pakistan has adopted, of saying that, look, we are open to a dialogue, let's talk about it, which really leads to nothing. So they are willing to do that, and they're keeping their calm. They're not overreacting. And they know that the kind of attacks that are being mounted against Pakistan can be pretty much continued indefinitely, given the ideological drive of the people who are attacking, given the kind of high they get with these kind of attacks. So yeah, they feel that they are ready to follow this kind of a policy endlessly. And in that sense, they are calling Pakistan's bluff. Now, what is likely to happen is that, yes, after every such attack, maybe the intensity of the Taliban or the TTP attacks inside Pakistan will reduce for a few weeks at best, and then there will be a massive spike, and in that period, the Taliban influence will continue to increase, as it seems to be happening right now, because already there are some reports that a number of border posts that had been abandoned by the Pakistan army have now been taken over by the TTP. Now, this makes the Pakistan army look really bad. So what do? They will want to go and reoccupy those posts. This cat and mouse game can be played indefinitely by the TTP guys who have nothing to lose. And then apart from that, what has also started happening is that the TTP guys have started, in a sense, controlling the roads in Pakistan, and that is something which is very significant. So there is no clear roadmap that the Pakistanis have on how to counter this threat. Yes, you have that typical Punjabi boastfulness of showing the Pashtun their place, kicking them on their backsides. That typical Punjabi flourishes are going on, but that is not a strategy. And Pakistan is really in a very tight spot insofar as Afghanistan is concerned, and are likely to be getting into an even digging this pit which they have originally dug for themselves. They could be digging this pit a little deeper if the attack on a staffer of the Indian consulate or the former Indian consulate, it's shut for now, in Jalalabad is anything to go by. An Afghan national who was working for the Indian consulate was targeted recently, reportedly by or allegedly by the Pakistanis, and this probably is the Pakistani way of trying to send a message to India that all the allegations that the Pakistanis hurl that India is behind what is happening on the Afghan-Pak border, which is utter nonsense, of course. But this is maybe their way of delivering a message, which then actually leaves the field open for India to actually tell the Taliban that, look, if these kind of attacks are going to be carried out against people who either work for us or against our own staffers, then this is on your head. You are responsible for their security. You promised us their security. So I think it'll deepen the dilemma for the Taliban and probably the angst in Afghanistan on Pakistan. So 2025 does not promise to be a very good year insofar as Afghanistan-Pakistan relations are concerned. In fact, What we could start seeing is the unraveling, a lot of it has already happened, but the unraveling of the Pakistani delusions of reducing Afghanistan into a client state, and the Taliban being almost like the Lashkar-e-Taiba or the Jaish-e-Mohammed proxies of the Pakistan army. I think that part is now out of the window. The Taliban are not going to play the Pakistani game because now they have their own game to play.